Hello everybody, here we are today talking about whether or not the Washington Capitals will make the playoffs this season. Now before we start, please make sure to subscribe if you're new to me or hockey, whatever the case may be. That being said, let's get on into it. So before we start with this, I would like to add that I do know the Hockey Guy did a video basically like this yesterday. The great news is I haven't watched it yet, so hopefully I can give my take on it and then kind of give my answer at the end. So now we're talking about the Capitals, whether or not they will make the playoffs. This was something that not that long ago didn't seem very likely. They were coming off an 80-point season, which was their lowest point total since the 2006-7 campaign. And this was a team that a couple weeks ago were 6 points out of the second wildcard spot, with three other teams being above them in the standings that weren't even in those final two spots. However, since about the middle of February, things have gone pretty well for them as they are 10-4-1 over the last 15 games and are a team that has seen their playoff odds surge as they recently were in a wildcard spot. However, Detroit just kicked them out, but they have games in hand and have one of the best points percentages during their run since February. Only 5 other teams have been able to capture more points than the Capitals, and it has sparked talk about whether or not Washington can get back to the playoffs and what exactly has gone right in that time, and then I'll give you my take at the end where I talk about whether or not I think they'll get there. So one of the things that have gone incredibly well for this team during this run is the power play improving. Looking at this side, I put out a video at some point over the season talking about how their power play wasn't that great. You know, they're kind of in that category where Pittsburgh was a team that we talked about, how their power play hadn't been great over the course of the season. And at one point, Washington was, I believe, dead last in power play percentage. And through their first 52 games of the year, they actually had a power play percentage that was 15.2%. However, things have turned around quite significantly over their past 15 games as it went from 15.2% to 34%, so it has doubled in that time, and they have the second best power play percentage since February 17th, only behind the Winnipeg Jets. So Washington been able to see their overall power play percentage go up in team standings, thanks in part to scoring a lot of goals on the man advantage. And in general, they're just scoring a lot of goals. They rank 6th in goals for per 60 during their 15-game spell and have been able to average about 3.6 goals per game. So looking at this, you have seen 7 occasions during this run where they have scored 4 or more goals in those games. Not always necessarily going to mean that you're going to have a lock that you win that game, but the logic kind of goes that if you're scoring 4 or more, you're probably at least in the game or have a good opportunity to win it. On top of some other things that I'm really liking that I'm seeing here, Dylan Strome has had a lot of points as he's been able to rack up recently. Strome has 18 points in 15 games, is the leading man for power play points in the past 15 games. And looking at this too, I'd like to add that with the power play clicking, like I talked about earlier, it's not just one individual that's been having a lot of goals. You know, looking at this side, you would expect maybe Ovi to have just a crazy amount of power play goals, while he does account for 25% of the goals on the man advantage. A little bit of everybody's been able to get in on the mix, which is something that I like to see, especially for a team that is trying to get into a wildcard spot. You don't want to be a one-man show when you're scoring goals on the power play, something they're not, and it's been good for them. So what are some things that they haven't been doing well? Well, I think looking at this 5-on-5 play isn't something that just strikes you as impressive. They are a side that is 13th in goals for per 60 during this spell, and they've outscored teams 35-30 run over this run. 31, excuse me. And they have an expected goals for per 60 of 20th. So looking at this, they are scoring goals at a higher rate than they're expected to, which again, that is good in certain situations, bad in other situations. If you're a team that's really good, it's probably a good sign. If you're a team that's bad but is starting to win games, you know, maybe that's kind of more of a problematic thing. And then looking at this as well, they are a side that's really just going about 50-50 for high danger chances. If you are trading it to where you have more allowed than you are getting, kind of a problem. And at high danger chances, they sit at 49%, and we're looking at shots for percentage just at 5-on-5 strength in general. They are 25th in the league, so a side that has barely outscored the opposition, that's been getting outchanced at high danger chances, and then a team that's just been getting shot or outshot in general. All kind of things that don't really spell a lot of good possibilities for you if you are looking to make the playoffs when you get to play a lot of minutes at 5-on-5. And remember how I talked earlier about how this power play was able to score a lot of goals? That is true, and been able to do that and successfully be able to win games thanks in part to their power play. But when you look at some of the numbers, their expected goals for percentage, or expected goals for per 60, excuse me, is 20th. Basically meaning that they are scoring goals way higher at a rate than they are expected to, and that is something that concerns me, because if you are not having great offensive numbers, or if you are but the expected goal total is way lower than what you're actually getting, it's one of those deals where is it situationally actually going to be a long-term plan where it can actually be sustainable? Probably not. And when looking at this team over their past 15 games, they are scoring 30% of their goals off the power play. Traditionally, or at least what I've heard and what I've actually been able to see some from better teams in the league at this point, they tend to stick closer to about 20% of their goals being on the man advantage. Do I have a problem necessarily with the team scoring a lot of goals off the power play? No, we've actually seen some teams during the course of this channel be able to do really well in the regular season standings thanks in part to scoring off the man advantage. But it is still something that does concern me. A lot of power play goals to drive the offense when you're not expecting them to score that many goals. So that is a little bit worrying. On top of that too, the PK percentage hasn't been great during this run, and in part they have just had some really bad PK numbers, and their goalie situation has actually been able to help them out. Goaltending has a save percentage that's better than I'd argue what they're getting in terms of defensive help. So these are some things that are going wrong that is a little bit concerning. So I do want to add that with a small stretch of play like this, you kind of have to look at game logs and see how everything works out. And I think what I'm seeing is kind of a trend where they beat teams that they're supposed to, and the teams that are a little bit better than them, you'd expect to go out there and probably beat them, are beating them. They had a 7-2 loss to Edmonton where they allowed 3 power play goals. They had a 3-0 shutout against Winnipeg where they lost, and Winnipeg really was able to take advantage of them at 5-on-5. I think they, in the first 2 periods of that game, were just able to get a lot more shots than Washington was able to get from what I remember, and it's just not really ideal to see some of those losses, but at the same time you're looking at some of these games with their wins and saying, well, that's good. So percentages and ranks may not work incredibly well, I guess, if you want to say, over the course of 15 games, but I do think we're seeing some indicators with those numbers, as well as the fact looking at the game logs and saying, well, against those teams that they probably should beat, they're going to do well. That just kind of makes sense. Looking at this team, I don't think everything's doom and gloom. Again, if you're able to capitalize on drawing penalties and punishing those teams, that is a good thing. So all in all, this is a team that hasn't been playing dominant, but been able to get wins, which is not necessarily a problem for me. I look at it like this: if your sole goal is to get to the playoffs, and you do, regardless of the fact that maybe you're having some bad underlying numbers, it's not necessarily a problem if your only goal is to make the playoffs. I don't really know what Washington's goal here is as a franchise at the moment. We've seen some extensions and some deals made with some of their younger guys that would kind of indicate a younger future, as well as the fact that they traded out guys like Kuznetsov, which again, some people will say, well, how valuable is he to us at this point? I think, obviously you can make your own argument there. But it does seem like this team is more geared to the future, but at the same time, too, making the playoffs at this point is probably better than losing in a certain situation, because I just don't think they're going to be able to have that bad of a spill that's going to improve their draft pick in the long run, because they're not going to be a bottom 4 side. They're going to be a team that probably finishes middle of the pack, and I just think that at this point, they're so close that they might as well just go out there and try to win. That's something that they're going to try to do, and now they are in a spot where the question then becomes, can they do this? And I think that answer is a little bit complicated because of the fact they have one of the harder remaining schedules for the season. There's 15 games, and they have some games in hand compared to, I believe, the Islanders, but I know for sure over Detroit they have games in hand. And now the question becomes, can they face this uphill battle over this final run of the season and play how they have been as of late in terms of getting wins? Like I said, the underlying numbers in some regards don't look perfect, but again, this is where you kind of make a stand and try to get a playoff push going. And I know for a lot of people that are OV fans, a lot of people that are Washington Capitals fans, more importantly, would probably be happy with getting back to the playoffs, just knowing that there might not be a ton of playoff appearances in the coming years. Really, like I said, you never want to say that it's going to be a bad period for any team, but it does seem like it's going to be harder and harder for this team to get into the playoffs with a look of some of these other teams out west. And then I would say the fact that the Red Wings and the Islanders are just a chaotic mess right now, where they'll get a bunch of wins and then they'll say, you know what sounds good after some wins? A nice losing streak, or where we're able to just drop a bunch of points when we really should be getting points. Kind of makes for a bit of a chaotic mess out east. So I don't want to say that I don't think they're going to make it, because those two sides are playing kind of poorly right now where they're not getting the results they want. But I do think with the schedule being how it is, with some games against like the Bruins, the Rangers, and things like that, it's going to be a situation where you got to pay attention to the standings and you got to wonder, are they actually going to be able to get there? 3 teams, I think, out east that have a somewhat realistic expectations of making the playoffs. I guess you could throw in maybe like Buffalo and Pittsburgh if you really wanted to be optimistic, but I guess we'll see. So for now, fans of the Washington Capitals or fans of hockey, keep your eyes peeled on this team and try to focus on where they are in the standings, as they could go down to the wire and will likely finish with more points than they did last season. So anyway, what are your thoughts on the Washington Capitals this year? Do you think that they'll make it to the playoffs? Do you think that they'll just miss? Do you think they'll have a bad stretch over their final 15 games? Let me know all that stuff down below in the comments. Also, please make sure to like this video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you're new. Everybody stay safe. Have a great night. And Eagle of Hockey already. Goodbye, Brigadiers and Brigadettes. This is your captain signing off. Have a great night.